Hi, everyone. I'm Tara Taronga with the Van Andel Institute for Education, and I'm so sorry that we're not able to meet in person. That's a real bummer. I was really looking forward to joining you guys in person, but I'm delighted that the Iowa Reading Council has decided to kind of come up with a virtual version to capture this content in a video format. So I will do my best to share some insights around project-based learning here in this video format. But of course, as you're going through, we're not able to obviously, customize it to your needs or address your questions. So my email is there on this slide. So I encourage you, if you have any questions along the way throughout this video or at the end, don't hesitate to reach out. I love helping teachers make project-based learning a reality and would be more than happy to help you do that. And all of the resources that are in here, the project ideas, all of that stuff that I might mention is at that website there in the red, blueappleteacher.org. So in case you get pulled away for anything or you forget where to kind of grab all this stuff, those are two ways you can get this information, my email or blueappleteacher.org. So we'll get started. This session is all about engagement. So I called it Let's Get Real, Increasing Engagement with Project-Based Learning. As we're looking to increase not just literacy, but all the content we have to teach as reading teachers, how can we really boost that engagement? Because we know that engagement leads to achievement. And I really found that project-based learning is a great way to do just that. So I want to start off a little bit my journey, why this is so important to me, why it is this topic kind of resonates for me. And as I'm doing that, think about why it resonates for you. Why is this something that you clicked on or maybe would have, chose that as session if we were in person? So I like to start first by thinking about sort of the war for attention that we are in with our students. At any given time, there is so much going on in their head, right? If we feel like we're not getting through, like their mind is somewhere else, that's because it probably is. You could all make your own slide similar to this one with 100 different things. But the point is there is so much going on in their heads that we have to do something to break through all that. And it's pretty hard. So first, acknowledge that that's really difficult and think about, in my mind, the only way I can break through all of that, some of it sort of, light and not so, meaningful, but some of it really meaningful, heavy stuff. The only way we can break through that is to give them content that actually matters to them. So that was kind of the first piece that resonated for me, is content that matters. And then I like this sort of comic out here. I expect you all to be independent, innovative, critical thinkers who will do exactly as I say. So I always find that, gets a chuckle, and it's funny because it's true. As teachers, we sort of came up in an educational environment that we probably thrived in, and it was probably not one that supported or promoted a lot of those sort of critical 21st century sort of skills like critical thinking and innovation. But we know we all want that out of our students, so how do we not fall back into that pattern maybe that we had growing up and that sometimes we feel like we need to get back into in order to cram enough information in? So I wanted to really teach those skills that I know are going to matter. They mattered 100 years ago, they still matter today, so I have a pretty good idea they're going to matter 100 years from now. I want to teach those skills. And then finally, sort of selfishly, I wanted to be a teacher that mattered to my kids. I wanted to be that one that stood out, that they remember, that they go home and tell their parents about, or that they come back and visit years later. I know we can't be that teacher for every student, but every student deserves some teacher like that, and I wanted to be that. So in short, kind of project-based learning was important to me because I wanted to teach content that actually mattered, skills that actually mattered, and I wanted to actually matter. So I found project-based learning to be a way to do that. So what I want to share with you today is sort of what is PBL, what it is, what it isn't, kind of just the nuts and bolts of that, and then share several examples of what it actually looks like in the classroom. Share lots of different examples and feel free to steal those and make them your own. And then how to make your own PBL experiences. So some tools and tips that you can use to really create this in your classroom and make it work for you. So that's what we have to go over today. We'll start with what is PBL anyway. So I like to just start by thinking, for you to kind of think about what are the characteristics of an authentic learning experience, something that you would characterize as an authentic learning experience. And if we were together and have you kind of work in your groups, maybe write on some chart paper, but these are some of the things that typically come up. Maybe it's the fact that they're sustained projects that take place over time, sort of sustained inquiry. Authentic instruction comes up a lot, the fact that it's somehow meaningful and real. Some measure of iterative thinking, right? The idea that you're going to take time and maybe a second draft or kind of work it out and fix things up. and get some feedback and act on it. It also comes up that you're making a difference somehow. The students are doing something that's actually making a difference. What others are things that authentic learning experiences might be characterized by? Engagement comes up a lot, that the students are engaged, that they're able to retain content, that there's some sort of real world application for what they're doing, that it matters in the world outside of school. Collaboration is another piece that comes up. There's lots of different characteristics that we could sort of utilize here to explain the characteristics, and there's lots of frameworks out there. And I love them all, but I think the thing for you is to come up with what are the words that resonate for you, that define what authentic learning experiences are, and let those be your criteria as you think about what project-based learning is. So because there's so many things that it can be, I like to sort of do this exercise to think about what it's not. Sometimes I think it can get a little bit watered down into thinking it's sort of a project at the end of a unit, let's say. And that's not really what PBL is about. So I'll show a few examples here and we'll sort of categorize them as whether they are PBL or not PBL. And it's not always super black and white, but it's nice to sort of see those examples, non-examples. So here's one. After learning about nutrition, the students design and create chef hats. So if you think about that, is that project-based learning or not? I'd probably say that's not. Not to say it's not a fun activity, it's not something that can build rapport with your student. It might be a great thing to do. But if you're looking to create a sustained inquiry authentic learning project, I wouldn't say that it's that. Contrast that with students learn about nutrition, they create healthy recipes, and they hold a family feast day with the community where they share out those recipes. That's a way to take that concept and make it a little bit more authentic, a little bit more sustained. You bring in some of those skills that matter, more PBL. Here's another one. Students investigate what it takes to preserve Earth and what it takes to live on Mars. They choose which they want to support and create a commercial to solicit donations for their selected cause. PBL, not PBL. That's a pretty robust project. I think that's something they would be involved in, especially that word investigate. They're actually taking the time to do the work to investigate what it takes. Contrast that with, again, not a bad activity. I think this is a fun thing to do. Students learn about all the planets and create a travel poster advertising the planet of their choice. So fun, exercises in creativity, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's a project-based learning unit per se, because it's not really grabbing that sustained inquiry. There's not an authentic audience at the end or a public product that's going to go to people that are in that field, let's say. It doesn't have that real world impact. Again, not discounting those as activities. There's place for those. But if you're trying to really develop a project-based learning unit, I would probably characterize that as not PBL. Here's one more. Students learn about energy conservation and hold a poster session for parents to share what they've learned. I feel like this one's a little bit of a tricky one. I think it has something of a public product because the parents are coming in. Obviously, the more we get further from the classroom, the higher that engagement goes, right? If it's just for the class, it's one level of engagement. Parents are the next level, community members might be another level, industry experts might be another level. So it's got a little bit of that. But they're just learning about energy conservation and maybe creating a poster. I would probably say that's not really PBL, as opposed to students conducting an energy audit of their school, and they petition their school board to make changes based on their learning. I think that one gives a nice difference between what really is a project-based learning unit, that they're making a real difference in their school. They're learning the information in an inquiry-based way by conducting their own audit. So hopefully that helps give some examples and non-examples of PBL to really say what it is. I always like to lean on other people's work whenever I can. So if you haven't found John Spencer, he's really a great advocate of project-based learning and these fun little drawing illustrative videos. So it's about a 2-minute video. I want to play this for you, and I think it gives a good idea, sort of illustrative idea of what project-based learning is and what happens when students engage in it. So I'm going to link out here to that, and let's watch that.
What happens when teachers design projects that empower students with voice and choice? Students embrace a maker mindset. They define themselves as inventors and creators. They learn to take creative risks. Here they experiment and engage in iterative thinking. When this happens, they embrace a growth mindset and grow resilient. They become problem solvers and systems thinkers. They become divergent thinkers, thinking outside the box. They'll use creative constraint to find original uses for materials. Here they discover it's okay to be different. Often students embrace curiosity and wonder. They become explorers, seeking out new information and thinking critically. They grow more empathetic as they design meaningful products that they launch to the world. On an academic level, students are more engaged and the information sticks. There's often an increase in student achievement. Meanwhile, they learn key skills like project management, collaboration, and communication. True, these projects will prepare students for the creative economy, but more importantly, they empower students for a creative life. Here they see that making is magic. We know that there's a time crunch in schools. Materials can be scarce. Sometimes you're stuck with a tight curriculum map. But when you, as a teacher, empower your students with voice and choice, they become the makers who change the world.
All right, so as I said, I just think that gives a nice overview of the power of project-based learning. And it also addresses some of the realities. I know that time constraints are real, but hopefully as we go through this, you'll see some of the sort of cross-curricular opportunities there are with project-based learning can really help save time and also make learning stick better. So I would say, also I don't want to lose sight of that selfish side of things. So yes, it makes learning stick. Yes, it makes all those kind of skills that matter and content that matters come alive. But for me, the bottom line, it's all about being that teacher that inspires students, right? That can make them stand up on desks for you. I think that's really the power of it. And even beyond that, more kind of scientifically, how do we kind of avoid the natural doldrums that come in to our work week? This is sort of a study that was done by the average happiness score of tweets on Twitter. And you'll see that Friday and Saturday here have the highest level of happiness in their tweets. People are excited about the weekend. Sunday kicks in and those blues start to come in, and Tuesday seems to be the saddest day of the week for Twitter users. So what can we do to make our Teacher Tuesdays less dreadful? And I know every day can't be a high, but I really believe project-based learning has that sort of intrinsic motivation for the kids that really kind of taps into why we became teachers in the first place. So I really think it can help our overall love of the profession and prevent burnout as well. So at Blue Apple, that's our kind of brand for our project-based learning and projects that we've done with students and kind of trying to help share those with teachers. And we kind of think about it in engagement in three ways. That we have to make sure students are emotionally engaged first and foremost. Their heart is in it. That they're actively engaged. There's physically something they are doing. And finally, cognitively engaged. So I like to think about those three pieces. And if we're, evaluating whether to do a project with students or how we can make a project better, coming back to these three elements is always a good place to start. And once we have that in place, once we say, all right, I know what they're going to do to keep their head, heart, and hands busy and entertained and occupied, then we look at what we call the framework or the pathway that we're going to go through. So every project, if you're going to build a project, I would suggest you take these same steps. Make sure that they start with why. They understand why what they're going to be doing or learning is important. They have time to think it through, to think through the content, to learn whatever it is they need to learn or investigate and learn that way. Then they work it out. They actually do whatever it is they need to do in this project. Create the commercial or create the fundraiser or whatever it is that they're going to create or do. That's the work it out phase. And then so important is to always have that fix it up stage. And I know the kids hate it. They, and I was like this. You turn in the first draft and I never want to see it again. Still like that sometimes. But that iterative process and getting feedback is what's so important and really elevates everybody's work. So it's always important to keep that in there. And then finally, sharing your awesome. Make sure all that hard work that they put into this project and that their hearts and minds and hands went into is then shared with an authentic audience, someone who actually cares about or knows about that particular topic. So sharing your awesome is super important. And we'll talk about some of these other things that can go, on the sides of that as well. The fact that you want your cross-curricular content to save you some time, opportunities for them to collaborate with others, and to connect to the real world. And I'll show you what that looks like. So that's a little bit about what project-based learning is and isn't. I know this is just a quick 1-hour session, so I went through that fairly quickly. But again, if you have any questions or want to dive into that further, I'm happy to do so. But sometimes it's best to do that with actual examples. So I'm going to show you another video here because seeing it in action, I think, is the most powerful way to really get yourself motivated and seeing what an example of project-based learning looks like. So I'll show a 2-minute video here of a project called Moments to Remember. And what I want you to do as this video is playing is just think about those elements of project-based learning that we talked about at the beginning. And what of those elements do you see happening during this video? If you want, you can write those elements down as you see this, or put them on Post-it notes, or just think them to yourself. So let's play Moments to Remember. It's about 2 minutes long.
So what me and 15 of my friends did was we met with 16 senior citizens and we made a really good relationship with them. We wanted to collect information about them so we could turn that information to a story. And then eventually in, I believe, May, we presented those stories, not to just our senior citizens, but all of them. It felt really good for me because I got to, hang out with people that I wouldn't usually hang out with. For you guys, what I saw was a little apprehension at first. We weren't sure what to expect. Yeah. But when the seniors came, they were so excited to meet you guys, and I think that excitement brought up your excitement. And then also, it was really fun to see their faces light up when they came for me to meet us because they don't get a lot of visitors, like maybe like their adult children like once or twice a week, but like they don't get to interact with them. It's really cool to be able to write your story too because you also like learn how to put things in like chronological order. And then it was also really interesting to see the changes that like what they had been like the garden section.
Oh, sure.
Do this project really gain a perspective of what it was like there. Leaving, like it was making plans like, oh, we'll go baseball games in time. I thought it was really good because you just got to have the feeling like you're helping someone and you're just making them smile, and that makes you smile. It's a huge circle of smiles. Yeah, and it makes the whole world.
So hopefully you saw some of those elements of authentic learning expression in that video. Obviously, it's hard to argue it's not something that's meaningful and impactful, but also think about all the content that came out of that. The math, as they were talking about the difference in prices from long ago to now. Social studies is an easy connection there with looking at what life was like in different eras. For science on this one, we were sort of stuck. We were thinking, how can we incorporate science in here? Because if you have one project and you incorporate all your content areas, you can really save time. And what we ended up doing, you have to get a little creative, but we paired the children with senior citizens that were born in the same month. So they were both born in January. Then they learned that the patterns of the night sky are such that the night sky looked the same on the nights of each of them were born, even though it might have been 50, 60 years apart. So you can see, and obviously tons of places for English language arts, they're writing a biography. So they learned the elements of biography. They could study theme. In fact, in this biography, we challenged them to not just write a chronological biography, but to actually think about what was the theme of this person's life, what made them tick, which was really powerful and really drove home those content standards that we need as well. So I'll share a few more examples, and I like to think about them in these 3 terms. So if we think about excitement, inquiry, and impact, those are the 3 things we want in any project. So I'll show you a few different examples of how we've done that. And again, feel free to take these and use them with your students. But if you think about excitement, just think about what are some ways that you get your students excited about learning, right? All sorts of things. Get those in your mind first. And then I'll show you some of the things that we did. So sometimes it's just getting crazy. Usually this is like to start off a lesson sometimes, but in this case, any kind of science demonstration, especially if some sort of discrepant event, something that doesn't make sense. Mr. Yenny here is lighting this dollar bill on fire, and he soaked it in alcohol first so that it won't burn. But we use that as a way to kick off an energy unit to talk about, let's not have our school burn through money. We're going to do that energy audit for our school. The next one, don't you love it when your class feels like this? Everyone's got their hands raised, wanting to know what's going on. And that's because that teacher is walking around with a mystery box, and it's got something that's sort of moving inside, so it really got their attention and that excitement going. And that connected then to the project where they're going to study what it would take to live on Mars and talk about how you have to be sort of adventurous and who's willing to put their hand in that mystery box with something that's moving around. Games are also a great way to get that excitement level. A project that we did called Lend a Hand is one where the students look at micro lending and the concept of economics, which can seem super dry until you make a game out of it. And in this game, there are some natural resources that the kids need to get, these little gummy fish, and these are the resources that they have to get them, and they have a budget of $12. Well, the trick is it's almost impossible to get those gummy fish off the table with any combination of these products, except for the ultimate fish catcher of doom, which you see there on the right with the googly eyes. That is available for $13. So they see the power of, as they're trying to, engineer something, again, think of all those skills they're using in this game, but they also see the power of $1. Sometimes one small loan, or micro lending as it's called, can make a huge difference for someone in a developing country who needs that extra little piece of money to buy the resources they need to make a difference in their community. So that's excitement. Inquiry was the next thing. Think about ways that you get your kids curious. What are ways that you kind of get their mind working? I'll share a few examples. Again, that project that we did where the students look at what it takes to sustain Earth versus to colonize Mars. Well, we try to promote inquiry and curiosity by having them actually perform those experiments. So on the left, you'll see a radish seed that has sprouted in Martian regolith, or simulated Martian soil. It's called regolith. And so this is a way for them to conduct an experiment to see what would it take to grow crops on Mars. Can we do that? On the right there's students conducting an experiment about comparing an LED light bulb to a traditional light bulb and seeing what the wattage difference is. So they're able to actually do that hands-on inquiry-based learning. Another one where they did some investigating and actually ended up being super apropos for the current world we're living in with COVID-19, but they looked at, it was called Prevent the Spread, and the students did an investigation where they studied different hand sanitizers and tested the effectiveness of those hand sanitizers in preventing different germs from spreading in their Petri dishes. So they were able to then petition their school to change their hand soap, or put out public service announcements to kind of encourage their friends and their family to wash their hands and what soap to use. So those are a couple examples of really kind of driving home that inquiry. And then the third of those components is impact. So think for yourself, how do your students make a difference in the world? What are some things that you're already doing where your kids are having an impact and you can really see that increases their engagement? A couple ways we did that. I mentioned Lend a Hand, that micro lending one. Well, this is a recipient of one of those loans. She needed a small amount of money to be able to, I believe it was to buy some fabric to be able to make dresses for her community. So they did a fundraiser. They raised, I think it was like $400, and were able to send it to her. And she was able to use that money to start her business. Another example of that was, we used a website called kiva.org, Kiva.org. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, that's a great place to go for those sorts of funding opportunities and micro lending opportunities. And then one on the right here is we have fourth and fifth graders that were teaching high school students a lesson on financial literacy, on financial management, which is a great way to sort of flip the idea of having kids teach one another, but to empower younger students to teach older students, especially when those older students, these were high school students about to enter the real world, and they really need to understand this before they start signing on all these credit card applications that come in the mail at that time. I know my daughter she was a senior last year and got tons of them. I was a little scared. So anyway, it's a great way to have an impact. These fourth and fifth graders feel like they're making a difference in the world. So hopefully that gives you a few examples of what PBL actually looks like in some classrooms. And now I want to give you some tools to really make your own PBL experiences. It starts with an idea. Just think about something, whether it's a topic that you're interested in or that you think your kids would be interested in. If you want, there's lots of ideas out there, but our website, blueappleteacher.org, if you go to, I think it's free resources, and then there's a ton of project cards there. So they're just like this, just a small paragraph or two of an idea, something that can get you thinking about, yeah, that's something my kids would actually like to do, or that's something I've always wanted to do, and it just sort of puts it there in front of you and can inspire you to get it done. So first, just grab a hold of an idea that makes sense to you. And the next thing is to look at what we call the storyboard. And this is just like anything, make a story out of it, can make it more relatable. And so I'll walk through the components of this storyboard, because once you have an idea, then you want to fill out these sort of pieces of this graphic organizer. Project title doesn't really matter. You can come up with that last. In grade level, those are some basic ideas. And the compelling question. And we have lots of stuff we do to help come up with a question, but you do want a question that the kids are going to really kind of raise their eyebrows about, they're going to be interested in. But here's the most important part, these three circles here in the middle. That's where I'd like you to start if you're thinking about a project. You can start anywhere on the sheet, but that's a good place to start. And that's answering this question, these three questions. How will this project engage my students emotionally? So just think about whether it's, they're going to feel good about helping a senior citizen, or they're going to, feel good about raising money for whatever cause it is, whatever it is they're going to do, and how are you going to engage those students emotionally? And then what are you going to have them do? Are they going to create a public service announcement? Are they going to create a book? Are they going to create a commercial? Are they going to do a fundraiser? What is it that they're going to actually do? And then what do you want them to actually learn from this? So thinking about those three things, and again, that's how do you engage them emotionally, physically or actively, and cognitively. And then once you have those pieces, then you can move on to some other elements of project-based learning, like real-world connections. And we sort of divide this into two pieces: bring the world to your students and bring the students to the world. By bring the world to your students, this includes bringing any kind of industry experts. Sometimes it's not fair, but they just get tired of hearing from us and they want to hear from someone else. All of a sudden their engagement goes way up, especially if it's sort of an expert in the field. So if you're studying nutrition, bring in a nutritionist or a chef or a pediatrician to talk about nutrition to your kids. So bring in those experts to the students. That's kind of that first part of that piece. And then how are you going to bring your students to the world? That's that idea of sort of an authentic product or a public product. Whatever it is they're going to make, how can you make sure that that gets disseminated to an audience beyond the classroom? Because that is going to up your engagement tremendously. And sometimes that can be as simple as putting it on social media. Create a hashtag and put it out on Twitter. See if you get anybody else to follow. Put it out on YouTube, make a TikTok, whatever it is. But find some way to have your product come out to the world beyond your classroom. So that's those real world connections. And then think about what content standards and skills you can teach. And sometimes you may know that first. Maybe you know I have to teach theme, or I have to teach this or that. You could start there, but I challenge you, if you start with engagement first, I bet you can connect whatever it is you need to teach to that project. Sometimes you might have to get creative, like we did with the science example with Moments to Remember, but I challenge you, I bet you can do it. And that way you have that authentic engagement project and you weave your content into it. But this is a place to log it to make sure you don't forget it. We do have to teach those content and skills. And then finally, the rest of page 1 here is collaboration options. How will your students work with each other? And how might they work with another class? Could you find another classroom within your school, within your city, your state, or throughout the country or throughout the world who might be willing to do this project with you? Twitter is a great resource for this. We've also hooked up teachers. If you want to do a project, and you can let us know, and we'll see if there's another teacher that we know doing the same project, and you can kind of make sure you're doing it at the same time and share information. We love doing that as well. So hopefully this is a graphic organizer that can take you from an idea to some of those specific elements of the project that you want to bring home, make sure happen. And then the next part of that is starting to bring it to life, making it a little bit more like a lesson plan. And this is where those pieces of the path that I mentioned earlier come into play. You think about your project, you think about those elements that you wrote down on that other page, and then you think, okay, how can I start with why? How can I bring this concept home to my students in a way that's going to be meaningful? What do they need to do to think it through, to get the information? How are they going to work it out? How am I going to give them time to give feedback to one another and fix it up? And then how are they going to share that awesome? So thinking through all of those steps. And I think the best way is to show you one more project here of how those steps really come to life through the life of a project. Maybe that'll help you when you go to do your own, or maybe this is a project you want to take and do yourself. So this one is called State of Sustainability, and that Start With Why is when they really start to understand. We wanted them to learn why sustainability matters. So lesson 1 was exactly that, and we played a game about fish, and they had a pond, and they had to think about how many fish could they catch in a day from this pond to feed their village, but knowing that each night they reproduce, and so if you caught them all, you don't have enough for the next day. So what's that magic number of the right amount that's going to be enough to feed your family, but not be so much that you've overfished and you don't have a sustainable pond? So it was a great way to sort of, get a game going and kind of peak that excitement level, but also drive home that kind of emotional impact of like, okay, I actually have to be sustainable or my future generations won't have enough fish here. You can also see here some of the content that we were able to weave in here. Think about all the number patterns that would go along with this, with sort of the rules that go along with the game in terms of how often the fish reproduce and that sort of thing. And of course, the science standard about environmental impact. Great way to bring that in here. In lesson 2, we explore sustainability through literature. So the Lorax is a perfect book for this, and kids love it. It's always a favorite with the kids. And of course, it's a great place to jump off and maybe do English language arts lesson on theme, right? It's a great story for that. Then in lesson 3, they're starting to think it through. They're starting to learn now what they need to learn to do this project. And so they learned about the UN's goals for sustainability. I think there are 17 of them, and they played another game, kind of one of those games where you put it on your head and you can't see it, and the other person has to guess which goal it is. So they learn each of these 17 sustainability goals, and they find one that resonates for them. And then once they've picked in their teams which sustainability goal they're going to focus on, they research their particular state. Again, this matters to them. How is my state doing with that particular sustainability goal? And they search the web, they do different, we have some people come in and talk to them. And this was a great way for them, again, a social studies lesson here on taking informed action. It's a standard at 4th grade. And it was a great way for them to learn about their state and how their state is faring in terms of sustainability. Then they took all the information that they gathered, and now they start to work it out and get creative, and they created infographics. This was a great way to think creatively and critically. Remember, teaching those skills that matter, taking that knowledge they learned, and then presenting it in a way that is compelling, that is visually appealing, and that really gets them thinking, and they get engaged with that. They love doing that. Next thing they did, the challenge here, the actual project, was to write a book of your state's sustainability. So they wrote it out. And again, here's a place to connect to content with nonfiction text features. So they were able to write something that would go along with their infographic. So each group might have a different sustainability goal, but they're all focusing on their state, so they can sort of become chapters of this one book about their state. And of course, we have to have this fix it up stage. So they revised their work, they did some peer editing, feedback, just building in that time to do that. Another thing that we like to emphasize with project-based learning is it can really give you some space to explicitly teach some of those social emotional learning skills. So here's one of the social emotional learning standards from Castle, actually 2 of them, responsible decision-making and relationship skills. If you're giving feedback to people, great way to build those relationship skills, as well as some decision-making in there about how do you do that. So some little mini lessons in there is a good thing to include in these projects to make sure that you are attending to some of those things, especially now. I feel like our kids are really needing some of that SEL attention. And then finally, they publish their work. There's so many great online publishing tools, so they could create an actual book. What things have people in Illinois done to help this goal? This is one page from the book. And so they're able to publish this book, and some of the classes who have done this have actually published that and put it out for sale. Or maybe they sent a copy to the governor of that state to sort of see what the state is doing. So hopefully that gave you a sense of how you bring it to life, how you go from that storyboard to an actual lesson by lesson, walking through of each of those steps in that path. And I'll show you one last video here to see how that project turned out. Again, another 2-minute video of what state of sustainability looked like. This time it was with a 7th grade classroom.
Hi, my name is Alicia Ray, and I use the Blue Apple Project State of Sustainability with my 7th graders. Even though the project was actually written for a 4th grade curriculum, I was able to easily modify it to meet my 7th grade needs. Think about it this way. That 6 people are not including myself. Look at my animals. I was able to use it in every content area. The students loved the literacy portion. They loved reading the lore apps, and they loved the book If the World Was a Village. It really sparked their curiosity about where we fit in with the rest of the world. They also really enjoyed the activity where they were able to collaborate with other students in their group to figure out exactly how many fish they should take from the pond to fully understand the word sustainable. Finally, they took the 17 goals and they prioritized those and created a public service announcement using Canva. Some students created Instagram posts, some students created brochures, and some created posters. We really enjoyed doing the Blue Apple project, and we look forward to seeing what else we do.
So again, I show you these really so you can see an example of it, and you'll notice, so that teacher used Canva, another one used a different, there's several different platforms that are suggested, but the idea is all of these projects, they should never look the same, you know, in any 2 teachers' classrooms. You want to take it and make it your own. So here's where if we were in person and have you take some time to think about it and share, but for sure take some time here to think about, you know, a project like that. If that's something you think your kids might be engaged in, what is the content that you need to teach that you could connect to that? You know, whether it's not just sustainability, but what math concepts, what science concepts, what reading language arts, what social studies, what are all the different areas, what art, what physical education, right? Kind of think broadly about what are all the different things you need to teach and how could you tie them to just this one project or one of the other ones that you saw today that maybe you'd like to do. I think that's really where it comes home for you and you can make it work for you, is to think about what content you need to teach and how you would connect it to a project like this. So hopefully I've given you enough information that you could create your own storyboard. And if you would like an editable version of that graphic organizer, please email me, tara.tarango@baei.org. Again, it's the beginning of this slide. But email me and I'll send that to you. And that way you can have an editable version. If you want to talk it through, I'm happy to do that as well. But start by creating your storyboard and answering those 3 questions. How will your idea engage students emotionally? What will they do? And what will they learn? That's a great place to start. And once you have that, obviously, you know, this isn't something that is easy to jump right into and do all those projects, you know, and kind of lose any sort of direct instruction. I'm not saying that. Start small, come up with, do one project. I think you'll find that you actually are able to save time with the amount of engagement that comes from your kids. So if you need more motivation, I think, to try this, I just want to remind you why you became a teacher. I can almost assure you it wasn't any of these reasons. It wasn't to be for the fame, money, and holidays, right? So no teacher ever. And it certainly wasn't so the kids could help pass standardized tests, which if there is a silver lining with COVID, can we just acknowledge the fact that there were no state tests and nobody died? But that becomes such the focus, right? But that's never what a teacher came into it for. You became a teacher to really inspire students. And I really believe projects like this can do that. And if I can help you in any way to make that happen, I would love to. So again, thank you very much. There's my email, my Twitter handle. If you do try some projects, drop me a line, show me how it goes. You can go there to blueappleteacher.org, lots of free project ideas. And then if you want to, you know, there's lots of other things that we do, professional development, actual projects that are available for sale as well. So thank you so much for your time and attention and thinking about project-based learning and how it can help you in your literacy instruction and beyond. And I hope someday to see you there in person, maybe at next year's conference. All right, take care.